Well, welcome back. We want to continue our program. I hope you had some productive roundtable discussions. We certainly did on my table. My observation, I was telling Eloise, that it seemed like we were a little more effective as the second and third round. I think everybody's a little more comfortable with the process. Maybe I was a little better facilitator. Perhaps you had similar observations in your roundtable discussions. But I've been asked to remind everybody that there are feedback forms on the table, and they would appreciate if you could fill them out so they can learn and upgrade the meeting for next time around. So please fill out those forms and return them, if you would. And now let me introduce our next speaker. It's going to be an interesting one. This is Chris Hobson. He's a Senior Vice President and Chief Environmental Officer for Research and Environmental Affairs at Southern Company, and he's going to be talking about regulatory landscape for coal technology solutions. Chris?
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Look, let's stipulate from the very beginning of this thing that I'm not here to really impart any great wisdom on you. I'm not going to talk about anything or show you anything that everybody in this room doesn't already know. What I'll try to do is just sort of go through some of these issues to sort of give you my perspective being emphasized there, and then maybe through question and answers we can have really a discussion about it more than anything else. This is sort of an interesting slide that we've been using for quite some time now. I'll tell you a funny story about this. When we first developed this timeline and matrix, we affectionately called it the train wreck. And we called it the train wreck because we were concerned about the impact on reliability that complying with these environmental regulations would cause. And so we called it that environmental reliability train wreck. Our railroad friends that haul our coal didn't particularly like the fact that we were calling it a train wreck. And so we tried to be a little more politically correct, and I started calling it this regulatory actions timeline. I was making a speech to a national group of folks from utilities that were doing NOx compliance and that sort of thing. It was a big group. And I used that term, and I got to the end of the presentation and asked for questions, and the first hand popped up, and a guy stood up and said, I don't know about y'all, but the company I come from, we call that a train wreck. So I'm not too shy about calling it a train wreck. But look, the perspective of this slide is simple. The message we have been trying to send to EPA, and frankly anybody who will listen, is that while EPA might have wanted to focus on MATS, the industry couldn't focus on MATS. The industry has to focus on this entire chart, because you can't make decisions around MATS on the economic viability of units if you don't first consider all of these, call them future requirements, but really they're very short-term future requirements. And so when we started talking about retirements and we started talking about all the impacts on generating units, we had this whole picture in mind, and you have to have this whole picture in mind. And I'm going to talk about a few of these issues, but again, I don't really want to go into the details of these issues. You all know them. I just want to sort of put them into some kind of context. But what I really wanted to talk about today, I think the whole purpose here is to talk about the regulatory challenges around coal, and we all know that there are a ton of challenges around coal these days. And again, another stipulation, let's stipulate that the major challenge to coal is not on this chart. What is it? What's the major challenge to coal today? Price of natural gas and this promise of unlimited availability. That's really the challenge here. But if you sort of look beyond that and you think about the things that you just focus more in on coal, these are the sort of things that are important. Got all this list of regulations that are coming, retrofitting, cross-media impacts that we really don't even fully understand yet. There's just a lot of these challenges that you all know. I'm not going to talk about MATS. Y'all probably discussed MATS enough to drive yourself crazy over the last couple of days, and I know we certainly have over the last 12 months in our company, and I'm sure you have as well. But certainly MATS is driving us at the moment. The important thing, as has been mentioned in the discussions we've been having around the tables, is there's still uncertainty around this because of reconsideration that's going on and legal challenges that might happen. And I don't diminish at all. In fact, I sort of relish, if you will, the Casper decision by the court, which actually cited EPA overreach in the implementation of the Casper rule as a reason for pulling that rule back. I think that was important words from the court. It doesn't necessarily translate into any opinion they will issue on any of these future rules, but at least it appeared on the radar screen, and I think that was important. I love this issue. Don't we all love this issue? I love this issue for several reasons. Number one, I'm a native Georgian, and I grew up and did most of my career here in Atlanta, and we have been dealing with the ozone non-abatement issue in Atlanta forever. And so it's been really a fascinating issue to watch. But what really intrigues me about this issue is this. This and Casper, I'm going to show you a slide on in a minute, even though it doesn't really exist anymore. It represents ongoing regulatory issues. The regulatory issue that continues to give, right? Every 5 years, we review the standard. Every 5 years, the standard changes. But that's what makes this so fascinating to me, because I believe that this issue will be the one where the questions of where we want to go environmentally ultimately get solved. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Governors, mayors, everyone struggling in a lot of country to figure out how in the world we're going to meet these increasingly stringent standards. Governors that are still trying to comply with standards from years past are dealing with new standards that are being issued. And I believe this is the issue where governors may begin to stand up and say, enough is enough. You can change the standard all you want to change it. We cannot get to where you want us to go. We cannot allow you as a federal government to impact us from highway dollar standpoint or what kind of businesses we could bring in. I believe this is the issue that may ultimately start the nationwide discussion about where we want to go environmentally. But other than that, it's a very technically difficult issue to deal with, especially in areas like Atlanta. And I think we'll see that expand as these standards necessarily get tighter. CARE or Casper is the same way, really just an expansion, right? Regional expansion of a non-attainment situation. Now you've broadened it out to impact other units that may be affecting downwind areas of non-attainment. It's really just an expansion of that same debate. Will we have governors in state A stand up and say, no, we can't make these changes. We don't think that we are impacting downwind sources, and will that debate just go to that level? It remains to be seen. Everybody knows there's a lot of uncertainty about what EPA is actually going to do about this rule. I mean, technically, CARE doesn't really exist, but CARE is sort of the law of the land right now. And so how is EPA going to react to that? We'll have to wait and see about that. Now you move away from the issues that continue to give to the issues that are out there that are going to impact us in the near future. And can there be a bigger one for our industry than, at least for coal-fired utilities like ourselves, than the coal combustion residuals rule? I think that second to the MATS rule, this is the rule that has the greatest opportunity to impact us the most. It just becomes, you let your mind wander down the trails of this issue, and you just get to places you can't imagine. I mean, first of all, can EPA really split ash and say, if it goes to the left in a pipe, it's non-hazardous. If it goes to the right in a pipe, it's hazardous. No, they probably can't do that. But more importantly, should EPA take this to the ultimate conclusion of being a hazardous waste, how in the world are we going to operate these power plants from an employee standpoint? Ash is everywhere on these sites. Are we going to have to put personal protection on every employee? You know, EPA wants to say no. EPA wants to say no, it won't be hazardous until it gets to point X in the process. Well, that sounds good, but can they legally do that? So that's going to be a very difficult issue. For a lot of us, clean water, particularly on 316B, is going to be a big issue. For Southern, it's not quite as big an issue because we do have so many of our units that already have closed cycle cooling, which I know doesn't get you all the way there, but it certainly is a good start. Effluent guidelines is going to be a little more challenging. A little more challenging because I think we're looking at technologies that we don't yet even know about, and I think there is a lot of questions here. I have some optimism that the timeline for effluent guidelines will give us the opportunity to really hone in on those technologies and we'll see. And then ultimately the greenhouse gas rule. As I said this morning in my comment, I think this industry is undergoing such a huge transformation, we can't even really appreciate it. I think we're going to get out in the 2015, 2016, 2017 timeframe and look at our emission rates of CO2 and go, I think we're going to find ourselves at levels that no legislation or no regulation would have actually required us to go. And now we'll have to wait and see if that really is the case. But if I look inside my own company, I think that's a real possibility. And so what are we going to do from a policy standpoint in the United States if, for instance, we get out to 2020 and you know what, we're already 50% reduction in the electric utility industry? Are we going to require more? Are we going to begin to focus on internationally and say, okay, look, you wanted the United States to be a leader, here we are. Maybe we got there because of a not so good economy, but hey, we got there, and so how are we going to approach that? I fear that we will try to establish new standards off of the new reality. And I think that if we come and require some level of reduction below what emissions are today or what emissions may be in 2015, we'll have a real challenge on our hands. But we'll have to just wait and see how all that unfolds. If I were king, I'd call a timeout. I'd say let's wait and see. We've got these new source performance standards. Let's go ahead and finalize the rule. Let's put those in place and let's address what we're going to do on new units in the future. But let's wait and see what 2015, 16, 17 looks like. Has the economy recovered? Has CO2 emissions gone back up some level? And do we need to talk about from that baseline, how are we going to approach it? I just don't think that with the transformation that's going on that there is a sense of urgency that there was, say, 5 years ago to deal with this issue. So from our perspective, if you look at all that, even though we're here to talk about coal, clearly we need every energy source we can muster in the future if we're going to meet energy demands, including energy efficiency and renewables and nuclear. For those of you who aren't completely familiar with Southern, let me tell you that Southern sort of has this whole thing bracketed, if you will. Our service territory is in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and we have an unregulated subsidiary that operates in other states, but that's our core territory. Over on the very western part of our service territory in Kemper County, Mississippi, we're building an IGCC, Integrated Gasification Combined Cycle plant that's using Mississippi lignite and will capture 70% of the CO2 to be used in enhanced oil recovery. And then over on the eastern side of our service territory, near Augusta, Georgia, we're building the first 2 nuclear units that hopefully are the front end of this nuclear renaissance that might occur. So we sort of have our service territory bracketed by the latest and greatest technologies, and we hope to have a good vision of what those technologies look like going forward. But certainly we need all those technologies, and we need a research, development, and deployment strategy in this country to make sure that those technologies can go forward. From my perspective, this whole issue of environmental would be better served if we actually had a national energy policy. I think we have sort of relied on EPA, if you will, over the last 10, 15, 20 years to drive energy policy by this series of environmental regulations. Has it been effective in driving energy policy? Well, certainly. If you take a look at what has happened, it has. But is that really the right way to do it? We make the industry sort of feel like a pinball machine, if you will, going from one side to the other based on what the environmental regulation of the day is. And it may get us to the same point, but it is a highly efficient and highly expensive way to do it. And we really need to think about what we want our energy future to look like. Coal has to be part of that. Just like renewables, just like energy efficiency, just like nuclear, it has to be. Why does it have to be? It has to be because it is our most abundant energy source. Notwithstanding the promise of all the natural gas, it is an important energy source. And I, for one, believe that the coal that is in the United States will be burned somewhere in the world. It might not be in the United States, it might be somewhere else. Well, why not take advantage of that coal to the benefit of our customers versus letting it go offshore and being at the benefit of somebody else's customers? And it does have a role to play in the whole energy security question. There are a lot of things we can do with coal. I tell you the other thing about natural gas and this dependency on natural gas where we're going is, I for one think that natural gas is a very valuable resource, probably too valuable of a natural resource to be using to generate electricity when we have so many other ways that we can generate electricity. But I also believe we'll say that about coal one day, because you can do so many things with gasification and whatnot. You can do so many things with coal that aren't important to us today, but may well be important to us in the future. So here we go. Coal plants are very expensive to build. That's one of the biggest challenges. The shale gas promise. Nobody that I know of is considering, other than finishing off projects that are out there, I don't think anybody that I know of is actually considering coal as an option. Shale gas prices the way they are, and I think gas will be the preferred option, at least for the remainder of my career, and I think well into the future. And as mentioned earlier, this whole issue of diminishing R&D funding. I tell you, as a company that does a great deal of research around carbon dioxide capture, this research has gotten enormously expensive, and I'll talk about that earlier. And now is absolutely not the time to be pulling back research dollars. It is really the time, if we can figure out how to do it, to double down on these research. So we need more emission control research, absolutely. We're doing advanced generation deployment, and I think the whole issue around carbon capture and sequestration is important. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit when I talk about our National Carbon Capture Center. But I think we're sort of in a position, sort of in an awkward position on carbon capture and sequestration research. We're doing a great deal of research, as are other companies around the country, on the traditional amine scrubbing. Now, this would be a technology that I think that if we were required in the short term to put on CCS, this is a technology we'd look to. It's a technology we know, but it's also an enormously expensive technology. And I think there are some marginal improvements to be made on the efficiency penalties here, but I don't think that there is a game-changing sort of advancement there. But you have to continue to do that research in case we're required in the short term to do something with carbon capture and sequestration. On the other hand, we've got to look to the ideas that are still out there somewhere, locked in somebody's head or locked in a lab somewhere. Because if 25 years from now we're talking about carbon capture and sequestration and we're still talking about amine scrubbing, we will have been a dismal failure on the whole research side of this issue. So a lot of work to be done there. And here's sort of a list of the projects that we're doing. It is not a comprehensive project. I'm going to talk about some of these in detail, but I will mention the IGCC plant over at Mississippi Power that we're building, and the first of a kind nuclear units. But we also have a large solar facility, and we're getting more and more into solar. We partnered with Ted Turner out in New Mexico for the Cimarron facility, and we have just started operating the largest biomass plant in the country in Texas. We're in a PPA with the city of Austin and generating electricity there. So we're trying to do a soup to nuts, if you will, sort of research portfolio. And let me talk about a couple of these. The first is the National Carbon Capture Center, which is actually the DOE National Carbon Capture Center. Southern is contractor, along with other partners. We have other partners, and we operate this at Wilsonville, Alabama. I know y'all don't know where Wilsonville, Alabama is. I didn't either till I moved there. But we have a power plant there, Plant Gaston, and so it gives us an opportunity to do two things. It gives us the opportunity to construct, as you can see here, a post-combustion capture system at Plant Gaston, where we have actually constructed bays where technology vendors can bring their technologies, plug into these bays. We will provide them flue gas, steam, electricity, water, whatever it is they need, and this gives them the opportunity to test their technologies and determine whether or not they are commercially viable. And then they leave us and they go and they pursue the commercialization process. At the same time, because we have a pilot gasification process here, we're able to do pre-combustion CO2 capture research. And again, that's where we're trying to draw these ideas out of the labs. My favorite story is we were visited one day from the Pacific Northwest lab, and they said, we have this great solid absorbent material that we think will revolutionize carbon capture technology. And we said, terrific. bring us some and we will test it. And they said, no, you don't understand. This is all we have right here. This is it. Well, we don't do that kind of research, but we're trying to pull that kind of research out. And we try to provide an environment where these ideas can be brought and tested. And that's been a very successful and will continue to be facility for us. Plant Berry is, to our way of thinking, the largest post-combustion carbon capture and sequestration project on a coal-fired plant in the world. But notice it's only 25 megawatts. That's important. If it's the biggest and it's only 25 megawatts, that means we are way down on that technology development curve. This has been an extraordinarily good project for us, even in the early stages. We have partnered with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. We have built this facility at Plant Berry down near Mobile, Alabama, and we have just now fully integrated so that we are sequestering at about 10,000 feet 150,000 tons of CO2 per year. So it's a good facility. We have seen some opportunities to improve efficiencies. Mitsubishi is the owner of the technology, and they are the owner of the intellectual property around the amine, and so they have an opportunity here to improve their efficiencies as well. So this has been a great project for us, even though it is still very new. Now, let me use this as an opportunity to talk to you about the cost of this research and why it is important that the federal government stay involved in this kind of research. This project cost us about $160 million to put on the ground at 25 megawatt scale. And people say, why did you go 25 megawatts? Well, we went 25 megawatts because we didn't want to have so much money invested in this project that you couldn't play with it. We like to affectionately say we want to break it. We want to understand how it works. We want to rebuild it. We want to be able to do whatever we want to. And if you built something at, say, a 200 megawatt scale, you couldn't do that. But to scale this project up from 25 megawatts to 200 megawatts, which would be the natural next scale up of this project, would cost us $750 million. Now, it is difficult to go into your management and say we need $750 million to do a 200 megawatt carbon capture and sequestration demonstration project. It's very difficult to do, and that's why it's important that the federal government be part of these research efforts, because they can bring that kind of leverage. This is on a 900 megawatt unit. Who knows what it would cost to scale it up to all 900 megawatts? The point is, when you talk about carbon capture and sequestration, we have to recognize where on that technology development curve we really are. Can we do it? Do we understand the chemical processes? Yes, we understand the chemical processes. Do we have it to where it's economically viable? No, we don't have it where it's economically viable. And we certainly don't have demonstration projects at a scale that will give us the confidence that we can go all the way up. So I think we sometimes, not the industry necessarily, but all those stakeholders that are involved in these research processes get a little fast and loose with determining whether or not technologies are available. And I think this is one of those situations where we have to really have honest and candid conversations about where we are. I've talked about the Kemper project, IGCC, 582 megawatts. So this is not a demonstration project. This is an absolute operating power plant. It will be able to operate either on natural gas or syngas. We have the Mississippi Lignite. It's essentially a mine mouth plant. And the lignite is priced such that it is very competitive with natural gas, even at the natural gas prices we see today. Well, not everybody's going to have that kind of opportunity, but this was a perfect place for us to do this. It is going to be a zero liquid discharge plant, which will be another step down this environmental pathway that will be important for us. Interestingly enough, though, when you go to zero liquid discharge, all of a sudden then you have people who come and complain that you're not returning water to the watershed. And so no matter which way you go here, you're always going to have somebody that doesn't like what you're doing, right? We all know that. One of our newest research facilities, in fact, it's still under construction, if you will, is the Water Research Center that we're doing right up the road in Cartersville, Georgia at our plant Bowen. This is a project with EPRI and other partners, and we have a whole host of technologies that we want to attract we want tested, and we hope to have sort of the same kind of model implemented here, that, if you will, that we do at the National Carbon Capture Center. Bring your technologies, show yourself, show us whether or not they are viable, and then go off and commercialize them. And we think there's great promise here, because we all know, don't we? CO2 might be a big deal, but water is the big deal. Anytime you go inside a new power plant, the hard questions are going to be around water. And I think that is only going to intensify in the future. And so these projects are critically important, and we think that we'll have a lot to learn there. So let me close by telling you the obvious. The landscape's difficult. It's complex. Nobody can predict where it's going to go. Are we going to go strictly natural gas, or are we going to try to do coal? How diverse will our generation fleet be in the future? I think that's going to be determined by how much money we're willing to invest up front in developing these technologies to the point that we are comfortable deploying them. But we've got to make sure that they are available, because our ultimate goal is to be able to provide safe, reliable, cost-effective electricity for our customers. And to do that, we've got to have this whole portfolio of technologies. So with that, if anybody has any questions or comments.
You talked about increased funding. Who do you think should, I mean, I agree that there should be increased research funding, but who do you think should pay for it? Should it be the utilities? Should it be ratepayers? Should it be the taxpayers? I mean, what do you think the companies should be doing research inside? Should the vendors be doing research? Should they be giving grants to universities? I guess just what's your personal opinion about the best way to do the research?
Well, look, let me tell you why that's an easy question and then a hard question. The model that we've lived under for so many years is that this was sort of a private-public partnership between the government, and we, in our company, could go out and attract other companies to come in with us, bring EPRI in. EPRI is an extraordinarily valuable partner here. They are an essential partner here. Bring them in, and then work with Department of Energy and others at the federal level to bring those research projects. Now it becomes a different day. Do the dollars that are required to do this research require us to think differently about that? Do we do a wires charge? Do we do some way for taxpayers? I don't know the answer to those questions. I prefer the model that we're under now, because I think that it is that any step you go down any of those lines, it makes it more complex to do. But I hear what you're saying in your question. I don't know whether that model is going to work in the future. There may have to be more people with skin in this game than are now, just because of the cost. But those are tough political questions.
Other questions?
Terrific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.